Well, good afternoon and welcome to another Reliability Roadmap Web Workshop. My name is Terrence O'Hanlon. I'm the publisher and editor at Reliability Web and Uptime Magazine, and it's my great pleasure to be your host and your moderator for today. If you are looking for the Web Workshop, the connection between RCM2 and the PAS-55 Asset Management Framework, then you're in the right place. While the PAS-55 specification provides a framework for effective asset management, it does not dictate the methods for achieving PAS-55 compliance. There are many approaches to implementation of the requirements outlined in PAS-55, and reliability-centered maintenance, RCM2, is one of the choices available. This web workshop will provide insight into the RCM2 methodology and how it applies to the PAS-55 specification. Today, we've set up these 3 learning takeaway points at a minimum we're hoping that you can achieve. Parts of the PAS-55 specification can be achieved through implementation of RCM2. That RCM2 helps you to understand the causes of failure in your equipment, failure modes, and if applied correctly, RCM2 results in technically valid, optimized maintenance programs. We're very lucky to have Mike Schultz, CMRP and an MMP, as our web workshop leader. He's with Asset Performance Group. He's the managing director at APG Asset Performance Group, a provider of implementation-focused asset performance management solutions, formerly a senior corporate reliability specialist and a 30-year employee at ArcelorMittal Dofasco. I'm going to just jump in for a second. If any of you are familiar with, we've been covering Dofasco for 12 years now, and they've been doing fantastic maintenance reliability for 15 or 20 years. They are really the benchmark for maintenance reliability, and Mike was a big part of that program. Mr. Schultz now draws on his extensive experience to help APG strengthen and refine its reliability and work ID practices, as well as develop, deliver education, the need for reliability, and PAS-55. Before we start, we just want to remind you, if you haven't already done so, to request your free subscription to Uptime Magazine at uptimemagazine.com. There's a subscribe tab down in the lower part of the page. You'll be able to click and fill out. If you are in the U.S., we will send you a print edition for free. Anywhere else in the world, we're glad to send you a digital edition for free. If you have an iPad or an iPhone or an iTouch, you can search the App Store for Uptime and get a 2-year library on your device at absolutely no cost. So we hope you'll join us with that. Again, before we start, just a quick reminder, we have 2 conferences coming up you may be interested in. RCM for SAP, October 4th through the 7th, basically using RCM in an SAP environment. Lube 2011, Lubrication Reliability Conference, November 11th through the 4th, if you're interested in lubrication best practices. And last but not least, the 26th International Maintenance Conference, IMC 2011. It's the longest running continuous maintenance conference in the world, one of the biggest and one of the best, December 5th through the 8th, 2011. Learning zones include maintenance reliability, operations excellence, MRO and EAM, predictive maintenance, lubrication. We'll be granting the Uptime Awards there, and the Uptime Award winners will be making presentations, as well as hands-on learning labs. More information is available at imc-2011.com. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand Mike the presentation. Mike, here you go, and thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. We very much appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be with you folks, and this is my first webinar, so we'll give this a try. Show my screen and resume the slideshow. Hey, look at that, it works. Thank you, Terry.
Look at we're seeing it perfectly, so again, thank you and welcome.
Thanks, Terry. So it's always good, especially when you're going to entertain discussion on a reliability subject, that we have a reliable entrance into a presentation, and it looks like we've got that. No surprise, working with the folks at Reliability Web who truly do espouse and are esteemed in the reliability world. Thank you, Terry, for that stellar introduction. This morning we are going to have a little discussion on a couple of subjects and look at some integration elements. The agenda for the discussion today will be PAS-55, talk a little bit about its background. I'll have a very brief and marginal overview of PAS-55, but this isn't really intended to be a PAS-55 presentation. I know there's been a few of those already, and please visit the reliabilityweb.com website for some of the previous items that were done. They were well done. Going to spend a little bit of time on RCM as well, introduction level, and touch on a few of the points that Terry mentioned in the learning objectives. And then I'm going to move forward into what I refer to as the integration elements, or the components where I see connection or touch points between reliability-centric maintenance or other work identification strategies and the requirements within the PAS-55 document. And finally, we'll have a quick summary.
One thing I'm going to jump in, Mike, real quickly, and I just apologize for interrupting, is that we do have some questions that we're going to ask of the attendees throughout this presentation. So pay close attention so we can make sure that we get your participation in those questions as well.
Thanks, Terry. You're absolutely right. And for those of you who thought there wasn't going to be a test, well, there is going to be. But hopefully that'll be a good bit of feedback and some points for discussion as we move forward. Asset Performance Group, that's the folks that I'm now a member of as Managing Director. We've been in business since 2003. We're reliability experts from across multiple industries. We've got offices here in Hamilton, where I'm located, out in Calgary and Vancouver, along with other resources throughout North America. And our focus is asset care solutions, trying to be a leader in this business and performance management results, and tap into that whole global network of reliability experts like the folks at reliabilityweb.com. So PAS-55, publicly available standard. It's for specification. It has been around, or first published in May 2004, and for all intents and purposes was a first kick at trying to put some structure and style and specification around the concept of physical asset management. That publication produced both a requirement specification along with an implementation guide for people who are interested in trying to standardize, formalize, and systematize their asset management strategies. 2006, along came an assessment methodology to provide some sort of way of gauging compliance, if you will, to the specification. And interestingly, Ofgem, who is the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets in Great Britain, made PAS-55 in its previous form even a requirement moving forward in those industries in Great Britain. So credit to those folks for recognizing the importance and the benefit of the PAS. A big change in 2008, a real step forward, if you will, a learnings and improvement phase even within the specification. 50 organizations were involved across 15 industry sectors in 10 countries to provide a number of recommendations back to the sponsor team and the development team, and that resulted in an updated version, which is the current specification. You can see in the booklet to the right, it is PAS-55, but 2008 is the update, and that has become the standard now around about 2010, and the one that we're trying to comply and work towards. Fundamentally, the PAS-55 specification is really a top-down approach to asset management. We start with a very powerful and strong understanding of organizational goals, looking at items just slightly below the corporate organizational management level. I would offer that, in general, this is quite a leap from where most asset management systems and solutions have resided. Generally, we would have seen them on the bottom of that pyramid in the optimized life cycle. In fact, I could venture to say, even within that, a lot of companies beginning were interested primarily in maintaining, probably utilizing, not much thought given to acquire and create or renew and dispose. So PAS-55, as you can see, has expanded that scope significantly, moving right above the optimized life cycle activities into sustained performance, risk optimization, and actually right up to managing that asset portfolio. See, on the surface, it seems to be fairly intuitive. You know, shouldn't the goal of every organization really be to run equipment at the highest efficiency and lowest cost? You'd think so. And at the core, this is quite true. However, the results will need to understand in detail the overall business model. Many organizations are constrained and enabled by this. We also see things like variables, such as current market conditions or cash flow or redundancy, customer service, a number of others, penalties, acquisitions. They all play a part in an organization's direction and influence greatly what they expect to get from that equipment and subsequently drive what will become the best maintenance strategy for the organization. To get going, we need to determine that asset management portfolio, and many organizations have a broad number of businesses or discrete functions within the business. By example, a power generation company, let's say, may have a number of different fuel type plants: nuclear, coal, combined gas and wind or hydro. And these businesses, although under the power and generation umbrella, all have different business expectations, market strategies, and value to the organization. So in that example, the coal generation site may have a high degree of reliability and structure to avoid penalties. And in this example, the wind generation folks may have been more advantageously designed to provide a green source to their company and have the ability to perhaps make up in off-peak times and supplement the overall grid. At the end of the day, it's important that the entire asset portfolio is understood, that its impact on the business is clear, and that has been written and developed at a significantly high level in the organization, certainly above where we're more typically used to operating. Within that portfolio as well, there could be a number of subsystems that need to be managed. There could be critical or redundant systems, superfluous systems, and it's important to understand the importance and required function of those asset systems as they contribute to the overall asset portfolio. Finally, manage the assets themselves at that base level, the managing assets level, understanding their impact and how they impact the overall business. We have to look at them truly from a create, acquire, or acquisition perspective, all the way through the life cycle to renew and disposal, and policies, procedures, practices need to be established at those levels and across that spectrum that contribute up within that pyramid. Another diagram that's used in PAS-55 outline is this one that shows that organizational strategic plan. What is the vision? What are the values? What's the stakeholder requirements and goals? Where's your risk management? And those feed or flow naturally down into a series of primary policies, strategies, and objectives. And we'll start with the first one, asset management policy. It mandates really what it is we're trying to do and how we're going to control the overall asset management system. Below that, we see management strategies that can contribute directly to that policy, long-term, optimized, and sustainable. And then the objectives associated with those individual strategies. Do we really know where we're going with this strategy? Do we really understand specifically what the measurable outcomes are and how they contribute to the overall asset management system? And then finally, at perhaps a level most maintainers and reliability folks are a little more familiar with, we see discrete asset management plans, these true actions and responsibilities, the people, the timescales across that entire strategy and how we deliver those objectives. At the end of the day, PAS-55 outlines truly what needs to be done. It does not drive down into specific or discrete methods. Therefore, it does not prescribe the how. What I would like to talk about today is an RCM integration into the principles of the PAS, specifically Section 4, which deals with asset management system requirements, and see if we can find where those touch points are between the what that's required and the RCM, which may be one of the hows. Before we jump into that, we'll have a couple seconds on reliability-centered maintenance and where it was derived and arrived at. It was fundamentally initially developed in commercial aviation. It was done to directly reduce the safety incidents associated with equipment failure in aircraft. Two fine gentlemen, Stanley Nolan and Howard Heap, worked diligently on behalf of United Airlines specifically, but also at the request of the U.S. Department of Defense, to understand exactly how we can improve the reliability on aircraft. And obviously the Department of Defense had a vested interest in that as well. In 1978, they published the report, Reliability-Centered Maintenance in the Aviation Industry, hence the term. And that report was accepted and understood and implemented in those areas. Interestingly, it became clear that this was not an aviation or aircraft specific analysis technique. This was in fact an analysis technique for physical assets in general. And the more asset-intensive the business, the more appropriate and logical it would be to try to use it. So a number of variations were created off of that standard, and they became businesses or marketable variations. And that's how RCM began to become introduced into the world of general industry. Some of those variations went off in some tangential ways and interesting approaches, and for all intents and purposes we'll say there was a desire in the latter part of the 90s and into the early 2000s to start to understand what really is RCM now, what was it in this original context, and have we got any kind of standard that we can compare against. And fortunately the Society of Automotive Engineers did an outstanding job sitting down with key experts in the field and gurus and the like, and came up with the SAE standards JA1011 and JA1012, which really outline truly what it is to be called a reliability-centered maintenance type initiative. The fundamentals of RCM, again based quite closely on the principles of SAE JA1011 and 1012, is that RCM is a methodology, a tool, a technique. It's performed to determine what must be done to ensure any physical asset continues to do what its users want it to do. Based on how it's being operated today, you change those operating parameters, a lot of times the requirements change, and hence so must the actual tasks to support them. Fundamentally, the output I like to categorize into a few boxes. A mix of routine maintenance actions. We've got predictive, we've got preventive, and even some detective or functional testing type actions that directly support the requirements of the physical asset based on the user's demands. We also naturally see one-time changes to the configuration of the equipment, predominantly in the form of physical modifications. They could also be the policy changes in how the equipment is operated or what its expectations need to be based on its current design. And then lastly, we also often see procedural changes, ways in which people interact with equipment, be they operators or maintainers, and improvements to those procedures to eliminate or alleviate some of the failed conditions, along with training and to support effective operation and maintenance of those physical assets, the actual improved capability of people. So those are the three primary outputs. We get there in a formal RCM by asking 7 questions. The 7 questions, I always say in my teaching, seem very rudimentary and obvious, but as you start to delve into the world of reliability-centered maintenance, you find that there's quite a bit behind those questions. But at this level, we'll stick here and say, in order to move forward with a technically based maintenance program, we first must understand what it is those users want. The users fundamentally being the operators of the equipment. What are the functions of this equipment, and can we detail those out and provide specifications in the form of performance standards? And then the inverse is, if those are the functions, in what ways does that equipment fail to provide that function, or when is it functionally failed? And detail those out too. The next step is then for each functional failure to identify a cause that results in that functional failure and describe briefly, sometimes not so briefly, the events that occur when that failure mode takes place. And those 4 together are grouped together in an information gathering phase of an RCM analysis. The next piece deals directly with decision making and appropriate tasks to support the decision. The first step, though, is to actually understand how a failure mode matters. It's categorized into one of 4 categories: hidden, safety and environment, operational and non-operational. And when failure effects are written very well, it's quite easy to interpret what the direct impact is to the asset, the people, the stakeholders of the business. And for each of those categories, the group then attempts to look at a predictive or preventive task to try to manage or mitigate those failure consequences. What can be done to understand that failure mode before it occurs or when it's in the process of occurring? And even if something can be done, what is the value, the return on investment for the maintenance policy back to the business. Often we'll find that tasks that actually can be done, in many cases, shouldn't be done. They are not optimal. Sometimes the failure is actually a cheaper solution. If that's the case, and that particular suggested task is either not technically feasible or we're doing, we move to the seventh question, which simply offers up an opportunity for the participants to throw forward an idea. It may end right there in a no scheduled maintenance suggestion, or it may also provide a secondary action where a redesign may help to alleviate or reduce the consequences of those failures, and that's that output associated with one-time changes. RCM has been proven to be effective. There's just no question about that. Very effective in improving asset performance, and at the same time also effective in driving your maintenance program down to the lowest cost solution. I've said many times that RCM is one of the few things in life that allows you to have your cake and eat it too. Higher maintenance, higher operating effectiveness with higher or lower efficiency and therefore lower cost. So that's, I think, a point where I need to stop for a second, right, Terry?
Yep. So here we go. What is the standard that applies to RCM? Is it RCM 2, is it PAS-55, or is it JEA 1011 and JEA 1012? What is the standard that applies to reliability-centered maintenance? Is it RCM 2, is it PAS-55, or is it JEA 1011 and JEA 1012? It's actually, that's a typo. It's SAE JA 1011 and SAE JA 1012, but I think everybody knows what we're talking about here.
Exactly, Terry.
And we're going to give it 5 more seconds. I'm going to close it down. And Mike, on this call and web workshop, 8% said the standard that applies to RCM is RCM 2. No one said it was PAS-55, and 92% said it's the SAE, JA 1011, and JA 1012.
Excellent. Thanks, Terry. So a very high return on that one. Good news, and that is exactly the correct answer, that in fact the Society of Automotive Engineers did develop a standard which helps us to formalize around what true reliability-centered maintenance is based on its original design. So if you're interested in looking at that standard further, it is available on the Society of Automotive Engineers website. Thanks, Terry.
You bet.
So the integration points. We'll move forward then into that area. The standard, as it's written, is written in a series of sections, section 4 being predominantly what you're seeing on this screen. And really the touch points where I see a close or reasonable connection between the how and the what of the standard are in the areas of 4.3.1 in asset management strategy. We're going to talk about the management plan, 4.3.3, look a little bit at contingency planning, and then some discussion around the training, awareness, and competency areas of 4.4.3. I also see some connection or opportunity to improve on our risk identification and assessment requirements, and certainly in the implementation of asset management plans and performance and assessment improvement areas, we can see some connections with the RCM methodology as well on how that will support these specific elements. I wouldn't suggest that that's it. There are going to be many other touch points which are somewhat tangible or even a little intangible, but these are the ones that we'll discuss for the purpose of this presentation and say that we can probably define or describe some clear connections here. So let's deal with them, if we can, on an individual basis. Let's talk about asset management strategy. That's 4.3.1. It describes and points to our little chart there and says, the organization shall establish, document, implement, and maintain a long-term asset management strategy, which shall be authorized by top management. So the strategy shall, as it states further in the specification, identify the functions, performance, and conditions of existing asset systems and the critical systems. Clearly, based on some previous discussion when we talked about those, the concepts of RCM, RCM is founded on the principle of identifying and preserving asset functionality, that understanding that functionality is critical to moving forward. It is the first step in the RCM process, and therefore contributes directly to this section of the PAS where functionality and standards are required, especially for critical systems. Also, in the specification, it says that we should clearly state the approach and principal methods by which assets and asset systems will be managed. When top management starts to look at the PAS and wants to use it and have it in place, along with the general development of an asset management strategy, if top management has selected RCM as one of the tactics to deliver that process, then it will need to be supported by top management, and hence there will be a connection between the principal method to move things forward and the requirement that an approach and principal methods have been established. We also see the asset management plans in section 4.3.3 stating that the organization shall establish, document, and maintain asset management plans to achieve the asset management strategy and deliver the asset management objectives across the following life cycle objectives. We see objective A. During the creation, acquisition, or enhancement of assets, we need to contribute to those asset management plans. RCM can absolutely be applied during design, construction, certainly during commissioning. And when applied as such, we can end up with a turnkey or a solution from a maintenance and reliability perspective to the startup of new physical assets. In fact, looking into RCM origins, if you will, it was really, its real origins in the Nolan and Heap era were during that design and construction and commission of new aircraft. In general industry, we tend to find the RCM work identification strategies applied on existing assets. So it does apply to both, but it is absolutely applicable during that creation, acquisition, and enhancement phase. And when done this way, RCM will develop a technically based asset care program that can be implemented and operational before the asset is put into service, and then the benefits can be realized literally at start. Also within the asset management plan requirement, we see section B, which talks about utilization of assets, and section C, which talks about the maintenance of assets. Clearly, without a doubt, the closest connection between this discrete tool, this work identification strategy, and what the PAS is looking for. RCM will develop a failure management strategy to meet the key performance requirements of the asset. And in doing so, it will achieve the utilization requirements of that physical asset. Or, in the case of maintenance, the development of an effective and efficient maintenance program or series of practices will be provided, because this is fundamentally the primary deliverable from an RCM analysis. So a very solid connection between RCM as a tool and an asset management plan strategy. Let's talk for a second, though, of things other than RCM. Let's briefly discuss RCM variants. This comes up quite often. There are a number of variants, not true JA 1011 and 1012 compliant methods out there, such as perhaps asset care development or some maintenance program optimization techniques. And it's my assertion that these variants, if they utilize and have as a core fundamental the concepts of RCM, then we can certainly say that they directly support the objectives of this section of the PAS as well. At the end of the day, if correctly applied, these technically based programs will deliver job plans that support the asset management strategy. I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
All righty. So which of the following statements is not true? RCM identifies and preserves asset functionality. RCM maintenance plans don't consider equipment condition. RCM can be used during setup of new equipment. So which of the following statements is not true? that reliability-centered maintenance identifies and preserves asset functionality, that reliability-centered maintenance plans don't consider equipment condition, or that RCM can be used during the setup of new equipment. We're going to give it about 5 more seconds. And we're going to go ahead and close. Mike, I think you've trained them well. 0% chose RCM identifies and preserves asset functionality as not being true. 0% chose RCM can be used during the setup of new equipment as not being true. 100% chose RCM maintenance plans don't consider equipment condition. They spotted that as the one that is not true.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry. And again, I really love these poll questions and results. It provides an opportunity for some interaction and some feedback to us. Just to touch on that subject again, without a doubt, the RCM process is centered around that concept of preserving asset functionality, which is what the PAS is looking for as a part of the strategy and the plan. And again, this idea that it only applies either to existing facilities or facilities in operation, that's not true. It can definitely be applied at the start of new equipment. So, great job, folks. Thank you. All right, we'll move forward to the next section. Again, still under Asset Management Plans, section 4.3.4. We point to this, and it says the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain plans and or procedures for identifying and responding to incidents and emergency situations and maintaining the continuity of asset management systems. The specifics within that element of the PAS says that the plans or procedures shall include information on, along with the maintenance of any equipment that could be required during incidents or emergency situations. RCM as a technique, as a methodology, places a very heavy emphasis on the preservation of critical emergency systems and components. RCM has as its core the idea that we will be looking first at critical protection systems and subsequently any systems that are safety or inherently unsafe when failed or damaging to the environment when failed. Therefore, the output contributes directly to the plan that provides critical information on that equipment and most certainly the maintenance requirements of that equipment. Detailed work goes into that plan to maintain the functionality of the emergency or protective equipment. And it is entirely based on the idea of making sure that it operates reliably based on acceptable levels of availability. Therefore, we comply quite nicely with that section of the PAS as an output or a derivative of the analysis. Section 4.4 describes asset management enablers and controls, and we see a subsection there dealing with training, awareness, and competence. It states that the organization shall ensure that any person undertaking asset management has an appropriate level of competence. This is a slightly advantageous output of the analysis and not just probably why you're performing it, but there have been some people who have performed RCM to enhance knowledge and understanding of equipment. Fundamentally, there's 3 real pieces to this. First of all, asset management skills and competencies, they will be significantly improved through RCM training. Folks attending the training will receive enhanced knowledge, how equipment behaves, how it fails, and what we can do to manage and mitigate those failures, along with general reliability improvement concepts. Further to that, for those folks who are participating in actual analyses, they will significantly increase their knowledge and understanding of how that piece of equipment fails, how that piece of equipment works, and subsequently how we can undertake an asset management strategy for it. I have seen other examples in other areas, principally at the FASCO, where after some time the principles and concepts of reliability-centered maintenance and or reliability engineering become to be embedded in the day-to-day operation of folks. Operators and maintainers and supervisors begin to think in reliability terms as they either encounter unexpected interruptions or they're moving an asset management strategy forward. All of that results in heightened awareness, competence, and a thorough training element. We also see the base knowledge of the manufacturing process improved, and equipment idiosyncrasies are identified and understood and documented, which is very helpful for the current workforce, but then can be helpful for future workforces. We have an opportunity to take the output and use those as an input into training programs to understand the asset systems and subsystems, how they work, how they interact, how they fail, how they're managed, and perhaps even go as far as keeping the documents available to first-line operators and maintainers as a troubleshooting guide. Equally in 4.4, we also see the requirement for risk identification and assessment. It states that the organizational methodology for risk management shall have a classification of risks, and that they will be to be controlled by asset management objectives and plans. As I stated in question 5 of the RCM concepts, one of the key questions is just understanding what the consequence of a specific failure is. When a failure occurs, will it impact people? Can it injure or kill someone? Can it damage the environment? Or at the other end of the spectrum, is it simply a failure that has just the cost of repairs as consequence? By identifying those will help to classify the risk associated with the given management policy, and thereby also help us to achieve our objective of controlling the management objectives. Also, failure modes, when classified, when described effectively and in detail, will provide significant information about the events that occur during a particular failure, and hence help us again to understand those risks beyond just the categorization. Lastly, the decision logic that's applied in the decision making of an RCM analysis on a failure mode by failure mode basis puts a very heavy emphasis on the requirement to manage unacceptable levels of risk where the failure can result in injury, death, or damage to the environment. And therefore, in order to manage risks at an unacceptable level, it should in most cases become quantified. We need to know what is acceptable, hence we are then classifying and understanding and managing the risk associated with those failures. Implementation of asset management plans is section 4.5. I'm going to go on a limb and say partial or incomplete implementation of proactive work identification analyses, RCM being one of them, continues to be the #1 cause of failure to realize the benefits of the time and energy invested. I would go further than just RCM and say that would apply to practically any initiative, time and energy and investment of an analysis nature. It could be a gap assessment as simply as a root cause failure analysis. It could be your quality management system and quality improvement system, an engineering review. Failure to completely and effectively implement those solutions is probably the #1 cause of being unable to realize their benefit. Credit to PAS-55. The PAS puts a special emphasis on implementation, and in this section requires that you are thorough with the implementation of your particular strategies. It could be suggested that the use of standard project management techniques will help you to comply to this section and also help you to ensure success, because when that RCM is fully implemented in the asset management plans, you will realize the benefits that you are looking for. We'll let you go to the next one here, Terry, please.
Which sections of PAS-55 address partial or incomplete implementation of work identification? Is it section 4.3.4, 4.3.3, 4.5.1, 4.5.8? So spend a little bit of time here to figure this one out. And we're going to go ahead and close. Mike, on this web workshop, 13% said it was the first answer, section 4.3.4. 25% said it was section 4.3.3. 63%, that's the largest single block, said it was 4.5.1. 0% said it was 4.5.8.
Thank you, Jimmy. So we can't make all the questions easy. So that one was, without a doubt, a little trickier, and if you had a copy of the PAS in front of you, you probably would have been in a much better position. But it is 4.5.1, dealing specifically with the idea of partial or dealing with the idea of implementation being effective. And as I've stated, poor implementation then just results in really not realizing those benefits you're looking for. So well done, folks. Moving along, still within the implementation of Asset Management Plans 4.5, we do see 4.5.2. It has as a requirement that the organization shall ensure that tools, facilities, and equipment are maintained and, where appropriate, calibrated. RCM puts a strong emphasis on well-defined and well-developed maintenance practices, which would include recommendations or comments, or at the very least, at least listing any specialty tooling that would be required to perform a specific maintenance task. Along with that should be a process then in place to ensure that those tools are in good working order, that if you are out calibrating or modifying or checking something, the tool itself is providing appropriate information back to the maintainer or the operator. Therefore, the connection back to the analysis of this element is simply the identification of those tools and then realizing that those tools need to also be maintained and calibrated. And then we move to section 4.6, which deals with performance assessment and improvement. The PAS suggests or has in there in 4.6.2 the requirement that an investigation of asset-related failures, incidents, and nonconformities take place. RCM, or Reliability-Centered Maintenance, is a natural candidate to be used to close the gap on performance when failure investigation is required, and there's some suggestion that the maintenance plan is a contributing factor. It has occurred in the past where RCM as a tool has been used for root cause failure analysis techniques. When someone comes out in the morning to start their car, and they turn the key and the car doesn't start, you know instantly what the functional failure is. Car won't start. At that point in time, it's unlikely, unless you have other information readily available, that you can identify the individual failure modes or single failure mode that resulted in that. But you always know the functional failure. So we could employ an RCM method looking at single functional failures, the functional failure that resulted in your sentinel event or your significant failure event, and then use the RCM process to drive out the discrete failure modes that may have been causes or contributors to that, and put in place subsequently actions to manage or mitigate those failures. Once again, that would align quite nicely with the requirement to perform investigation of asset-related failures and incidents and other types of nonconformities. Okay, Terry, I think this is our last question.
All right. Can RCM variants such as maintenance program optimization and asset management also be used to support PAS-55? Yes or no? We're just looking for a simple yes or no. So can RCM variants such as maintenance program optimization and asset management also be used to support PAS-55? And we're going to close it in 5 seconds. And we'll share the results. 92%, Mike, said yes, they can. 8% said no, they cannot.
Thanks, Terry. It's my belief that where a variant has significant roots or grounding in RCM techniques and methodologies, that in fact we would certainly accept that as a method to move forward some of the elements that I've described already with respect to the PAS. I'm sure that'll be the subject of much debate over the next few years, but I've never been one for discounting some of the fine work that's performed quite often on perhaps non-critical systems or non-safety systems for a variety of reasons, where the RCM tool is either overkill or isn't necessarily going to provide and yield all of the benefits for the cost associated with it. So the simple answer is yes to that question, and I guess we'll debate that over the next number of years. Thanks, Terry. So in summary, I hope you've enjoyed this. I attempted to draw some alignments between PAS-55 and RCM. I think PAS-55 can make RCM very successful for your organization. Certainly an issue that we've heard of for years, and any kind of proactive strategy, again, be it quality improvement or process safety management improvement or asset reliability improvement, where we don't get a clear line of sight or site alignment from corporate goals through to the implementation plans, we'll truly start to stumble and have difficulty. Very much embrace the fine work done by these folks in the development of the specification and see it as a huge opportunity to move the success rate higher in all of the proactive work that we try to do, including RCM. From RCM's perspective, it contributes quite solidly to the PAS. It is, in my opinion, one of the easiest actions that you could start in support of PAS-55 compliance. Like a lot of things, PAS-55 is large and complex and perhaps even a little overwhelming for some organizations. RCM would be a great start, or other, as we said, variant work identification strategies as a way to start moving down that road. It will, without a doubt, naturally splinter off into other requirements and then begin to build sub-projects which will very much support the PAS, but it is a good start. It's a natural input and output, as I said, into some of the other requirements in PAS, and will provide a very solid foundation for further improvement in your asset management strategy as a whole. So that is the end of my presentation. I suspect now we'll open it up to some simple questions, please. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that. And you can type in questions in the chat box if you have questions for Mike or APG. As Mike mentioned before we start with the questions, if you go to either APG's website, I'm not sure if you have a slide with that on there or not, I don't recall it off the top of my head, or you go to Reliability Web and you click the tutorial and then search under Asset Management, you can see one of Mike's partners, James Nesbitt, has a series of, 6 or 7 or 8 lectures and web workshops on PAS-55 on various elements. He's really broken them down quite nicely. And in my opinion, APG and James in particular are some of the leaders in North America. It's a standard that came from Britain. It's quickly, which Mike really didn't mention, moving its way to an ISO asset management standard. That'll be by early 2013. And our prediction at Reliability Web and Uptime is that once the risk insurers and the regulators in various industries connect that there is an asset management standard, I think they'll be highly encouraging the people that they regulate or they insure the risk to adopt such a standard. So it would, I guess, long story short, our position is it would do you well to learn as much about this as possible. And early adopters will be rewarded and won't be back on their heels as much, in my humble opinion. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Mike.
I agree wholeheartedly, Terry, and I'm very excited about ISO bringing this on board. I mean, they've done a stellar job, as we know, in their 9,000 level related to quality, moved forward into the environmental world in 14. I'm not an ISO expert, but I believe is it 25, Terry, for health and safety?
Yes.
And now,
so in each one of those, there's a format ISO uses on a management system. So they're very consistent from standard to standard of management system. So if you're already an ISO 9001 house or ISO 14001, you'll find that the upcoming standard on asset management will fit into your management system quite easily. If you're not, you have some work to do. But if you are, it's good news for you.
That's exactly right, Terry. And with respect to PAS as being an input, it is just a natural input into an ISO standard. It has been so well written, so well documented, and so well delivered that it clearly has done most of the legwork and foundational work for ISO. I don't see many significant, if any, changes aside from, as you said, formatting with respect to that, and certainly when the regulators and the certifiers and the insurers get a hold of it, given some of the even more recent incidences, such as the effects of the recent tidal wave in Japan, we're going to certainly see a heightened requirement and desire to move to certification, especially in critical industries.
Yeah, absolutely. So where there's worldwide impact like that example that you give. And so also as Mike mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, PAS-55 nor ISO will be 55,000. Neither mention the how to. They're the what to. They're the framework. And so RCM is mentioned, but not saying that you must use RCM. So there's many ways to get there. And as Mike's last question, the second to the last question indicated, there are variants you can do, and that's a good segue to our first question, which is, Mike, what are your views on integrating TPM, or total productive maintenance? Some people call it autonomous maintenance, or operator performed maintenance, to PAS-55.
Yeah, well, the TPM initiative is broader than an asset management specification, as we know, but there are certain pillars, and of course there's many variants of TPM, so I'll speak to perhaps some of the typical or more generic ones, but there are certain pillars that I'm aware of, such as the professional maintenance and the autonomous maintenance, which have direct connection or contact to the PAS-55, and would certainly help along a certification route if a company were in the TPM mode, performing it already, or perhaps looking at it. Many of the elements that are required in TPM would support a certification of PAS-55.
And if you would continue on with that, Mike, what about how does TPM and RCM fit together? Do they work together well?
And they certainly do, and in some of the documentation I've seen, they tend to recommend that RCM occur at a later stage, and it's sort of beyond the standard cleaning and the clear duties and getting the operator folks involved. That's been a TPM style for a while. I don't really want to get into the debate one way or the other. It's been my assertion that I think you can do RCM sooner. However, each implementation is specific to itself, but definitely the TPM documentation I've seen supports RCM once again as one of those tools to move that process forward.
PAS-55 and or RCM, you can answer to either one of these. Are these only useful in discrete manufacturing? What about process? What about utilities, water, wastewater, shipyards, cranes? I mean, where does this standard apply? Where is it going to apply?
Well, I've got probably a very biased answer to that. I would say that that RCM analyses are appropriate. Any form of work identification, improvement strategy is appropriate, especially in asset-intensive industries, regardless of whether they're discrete or not, and especially where the impact of failure is significant. With respect to water and wastewater, as an example, there may be unbelievable levels of redundancy and buffering that are usually unprecedented in an industrial setting. However, the consequence of failure in those, again, especially related to drinking water, as was seen here in Ontario, is significant. So any industry, any manufacturing process, anything that has anything to do with assets, physical assets, RCM would clearly be applicable, and then, as we've stated, PAS-55 will take that even to a higher degree of compliance and assurance through the setting of strategies and objectives and goals for the overall management strategy.
And as far as the risk management section of RCM, the risk management elements that are in an RCM2 type of an analysis, very rigorous, are you saying basically that the specifications that are laid out in PAS-55 obviously call for risk management to be part of your asset management program and assessments? Are you saying basically that those are compliant, that they fully meet the intent?
No. I think in each of the critical elements of the PAS-55 document, it operates at a level above where RCM normally operates. It's operating at a strategic objective level.
So a business level?
Yeah, exactly, Terry. That's it. What I'm saying, though, is while there are some really solid touch points, and we saw those back in the maintenance plans, especially related to maintaining physical assets, those are just absolutely clear. There are some other areas where it's slight or it's additional, and that would be one. By looking at risk and understanding risk of failure on physical assets, even better if you quantified it, that you would assist in moving forward that risk identification and perhaps provide some input from an assessment perspective into what needs to be done.
Okay, so specific down at a tactical level, very good, but you might need also some additional elements to be examined in that regard, is what you're saying on the business or the strategic level.
Well, yeah, certainly with respect to Section 4.4.7 of risk management, we're just kind of scratching the surface using the RCM tool. There will be many other methods and requirements associated with other tools and strategies and policies in order to fully comply with that section.
All right, well, that makes sense. All right, well, terrific. Well, we're running a little bit out of time here. I think Mike and I would like to join to thank the audience for their participation in the poll questions and for their time and attention during this web workshop. We certainly hope that you were able to achieve the 3 learning point takeaways that we laid out, but we also hope that it has met your individual learning goals and that this has contributed to your knowledge and career in some way. We certainly would also like to thank the folks at APG, and especially Mike, for bringing us this educational web workshop and all the past web workshops. What is the, I apologize, Mike, what is the website address for APG?
It's www.apgassetcare.com.
Okay. apgassetcare.com, and if you click up there, you can see the past James Nesbitt series of PAS-55. If you're interested in this topic, we can't recommend any stronger that you go up and watch those. If you can't find them there, you can go to reliabilityweb.com, click on tutorials, and sort by asset management, and find them that way as well. But they've got other information you might be interested in up at APG Asset Care. So we would recommend that you go up there and take a look at that. And Mike, we're going to send you a list of the people that did attend here for follow-up, so I'm sure they'd be interested in having your contact information as well. Some of them are asking for some, maybe some case study information and things of that nature. So I'll make sure you get those questions and those requests from who's attended here, this web workshop. And again, Reliability Web, Uptime Magazine would really like to thank the folks at APG for continually taking the lead and bringing us these PAS-55 web workshops. We're very much appreciative, and our audience has given us feedback that they are appreciative as well. So thank you, Mike, and thank everybody up there for us.
Well, thanks to you too, Terry, and the folks at reliabilityweb.com. You guys have been at the forefront championing this before anybody even really knew what it was. And personal thanks to you, Terry. Fantastic job as moderator.
It's our pleasure, and let's keep it. Let's keep that partnership going onward and upward, and we'll bring some more of these to you guys in the future. This is Terry O'Hanlon at Reliability Web and Uptime Magazine signing off. Everybody have a great day now. Bye.